gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the Talking Crap podcast. I'm, of course, your host, the life coach, Lucas Jackson. I'm joined by my regular co-host, Jazzy Josh Porter.
Hello.
But also by an intruding Champagne Charlie.
All
We've
right.
got a guest reporter for this edition. Champagne Charlie will be on our next episode, talking about Chris Jericho, the second part of that. The first part is this week, when we're joined by the lovely Priscilla, Queen of the Ring. Chris Jericho, we'll talk about in more detail a lot over the next couple of weeks. A couple of specials coming up. He's celebrating his 30 year in the business. However, we've got some news before we get to that. And we're going to start with All Elite Wrestling, as next week, Dynamite will air just before NXT TakeOver 30. Because of the NBA, they've moved a few of the episodes around. So it's not airing on Wednesday night. So NXT have won the ratings war that week. But yeah, on the Saturday night, just before NXT TakeOver, and some big matches have been announced. You've got Cody against Brody Lee for the TNT Championship. We've got the Women's Tag Team Cup Tournament. That match to be determined. We've got FTR against the Private Party. And the Elite versus the Dark Order. That's a 6-man tag match. And Darby Allin's on the card too. So I think, this is kind of retaliation for when NXT did the Great American Bash opposite was it Fyre Fest, wasn't it? Or
Fighter Fest, yeah.
Fighter Fest, yeah.
I don't think it is. I think it's just a mess. Honestly, I don't think it was intentional. But can I just say one thing? The Women's Tag Team Cup. What are the chances that it's going to, the finale, or the finals, whatever you want to call it, is going to end up like the Cruiserweight Classic, where they magically reveal that, the winners of the Tag Team Cup have also won the new Tag Team titles?
Something like that, I'm imagining.
Yeah, I think so too.
But
I think
it's just a prediction of mine that it seems like
here's the thing,
maybe
team. I mean, they're just drawn together. You know what I mean?
Well, TNA used to have the Knockouts titles, which were the women's.
Yeah,
tag
but that only
titles.
lasted a couple of years. So.
Yeah, but that was
and
still
even
great.
Then, the last tag team champions was ODB and Eric Young.
yeah, but I mean, maybe it will, but I don't know. I think the AEW women's division is not very strong.
Not strong enough for a tag division, anyway.
Yeah, not for tag. I think they should fix the singles one first. But hey, look, there's some big matches next week. I'm looking for. I think Cody and Brody. That could be a tag team, actually, couldn't it? Cody and Brody. I think that could be a good match for the TNT Championship. I'm assuming that'll be the main event. They haven't announced whether Jericho is part of this or anything, but I guess you've actually got the Elite, haven't you, for the Dark Order? So yeah, I guess that might be a main event, in fact, and it's a 6-man tag. But I think it's good. I think. Our next piece of news comes from the SummerSlam location alerts, where there's still no venue. The latest rumours are showing that it could take place at the Amway Center in Orlando, without fans. But obviously, as it's an arena, it will allow for pyros and potentially a different kind of feel and look to the show, which I think is
better pyros and a potentially bigger set.
But yeah, I think that's what Vince is after. I think last week we spoke very much about how he wanted it on a boat, he wanted it on a beach. He wanted to go to Atlantic City to have the event with some fans. I think that has been rejected. But now we're at the stage where SummerSlam is less than almost a week away, basically.
And we don't know where it is.
I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Like, is it going to just go at the Performance Centre like everything else? Or
I honestly do not know. Probably most likely Performance Centre if they don't find anything within the next few days.
It's getting very close, isn't it?
I think there's no way they can't not have it at the PC, just because it's a week away. We don't know anything about it. I reckon they don't even know what's happening.
Well, the reports are that they'll be going in the setup on Friday and Saturday. This week that just passed. We don't pre-record these, we swear. They're apparently going in to set up stuff. Going in to set up stuff over the weekend and looking to basically host a show there next week. But yeah, we shall see with this. Sticking with WWE for a little bit, they have announced that today they are going to release some independent wrestling footage onto the WWE network.
I saw this on Instagram because I'm pretty sure I sent you a screenshot of their post. And they've got some pretty good promotions on there. What they're saying is it's the best indie promotions around the world.
Yeah.
What I've seen so far is WXW, West Side Extreme Wrestling from Germany, which is, I'm pretty sure, where they picked up Walter from.
Yeah.
But they've also got another place that Walter wrestled. Obviously, it's not all about Walter, but I'm just saying, it's a coincidence, which is Progress Wrestling, which is arguably the biggest indie promotion in the UK.
Yeah.
Or at least in England. And then they've also got ICW, the home of Drew Galloway, or Drew McIntyre.
Which makes sense, I think.
Yeah, Insane Championship Wrestling being the biggest promotion in Scotland. And then the last one was Evolve, which is like essentially WWE's
breeding ground.
Called? Yeah, breeding ground, developmental territory.
It's almost the NXT to NXT.
Yeah, because NXT is strongly considered a third brand now, as opposed to developmental territory.
Yeah.
So having Evolve is essentially like the new NXT, or you could consider it Florida Championship Wrestling, where it's not really talked about on the main product, but it's still there.
I think obviously WWE have been pushed to do this because they've got a lot of the footage now. And so I guess they feel they've got enough of the footage, let's put on there. And they can't ignore that this section of the audience wants to know more about their wrestlers. And it will help because they pretend, what I always dislike is how they pretend when, Drew McIntyre, when he'd left the company, that he just didn't work or didn't wrestle anymore.
Yeah.
Well, same thing when Sting debuted, it was like he disappeared in 2001. It's like, no, he fucking went to TNA and, had success there. And I think this is, finally they realise, look, we can't ignore it now because these guys, they need the foundations, and it will help resonate with the audience, I think. Because a lot of people don't know about some of the people, I think. And I think it's a good addition.
The thing I'm looking forward to most about Evolve is being able to watch more of Catchpoint, which is Drew Gulak and Matt Riddle's faction from Evolve. And it's... Sorry?
Oh, right, I'm saying.
Oh, I didn't hear what you said for a second then. But yeah, if Catchpoint, it was a great faction that I thought, and I'm just looking forward to seeing more of what they've done, because you can't get Evolve very easily in the UK without using, shall we say, unreliable sources.
I think it's a great idea though.
Yeah.
And perhaps it will lead the way to obviously some more footage, obviously from some of the American independents going on there too. Because I
get the feeling that by the sounds of it, NXT UK was the home of majority of European wrestlers that were picked up. So maybe, just maybe, they're scrapping NXT UK, or they're going to have a partnership with NXT UK and other promotions across Europe.
Perhaps, potentially, but I think they put a lot of money into NXT UK to close. I'm happy about it. Our final bit of news regards Bret Hart and comments from his podcast. What's it called? Yeah, Confessions of the Hitman, where he's made some quotes and statements that The Rock was bullied in his time in WWE. I'm going to quote some of the stuff that he said. So he said that like a lot of the wrestlers would give him a hard time in those days. I can remember going to bat, defending him. Defending Dwayne quite a few times and kind of looking out for him, Owen as well. And he felt that The Rock was a kind of marked guy. And particularly, he singled out people who were involved with here's Bret Hart, so what do you think the next words are going to come out of my mouth are? The Montreal screw job. And so he singled out obviously Shawn Michaels and Triple H. A lot of the same guys who had a problem with The Rock, the same guys that were involved in the screw job with me. So I had the same dislike for the same petty bullshit that these guys were all about. He's told a story as well about, he remembers Shawn Michaels coming to the dressing room and dressing down The Rock for using a top rope drop kick, which at the time was being used by a lot of people on the show, but Shawn Michaels felt
a missile drop kick.
Yeah, but Shawn Michaels felt that it was his move and basically told The Rock to never do it again. And that, a lot of people you know, a lot of people kind of, The Rock was deflated. Shawn at the time had a lot of weight in the company, and he felt that Triple H kind of felt the same, you know, about it, and kind of backed obviously a lot of what Shawn Michaels was saying. There was a positive here. He did praise The Rock's dad, believe it or not.
Rocky Johnson,
Yeah, he praised The Rock's dad, Rocky Johnson, said that he took him under his wing and that he had a lot of respect for him. But what do you think, man? You know, was there, you know, I guess, you know, it's 25 years ago, and that's all kind of, that's where Brett kind of is, it seems, at times, in his mind. But, I mean, do you believe this happened? Do you believe this happened? What are your thoughts?
Well, Shawn Michaels back in 1997 was a universal prick. So he could have brought up anything, you know, to try and piss somebody off. I mean, here's the thing. I don't think it's that much of a big deal, because a lot of people, especially who were mid-carders back then, would use stuff like drop kicks, missile drop kicks. It wouldn't be a big deal unless it was a signature move. If it's a signature move, then by all means, you know, you have the right to be annoyed. But on something as basic as a missile drop kick or a drop kick, that kind of thing.
I agree with you to an extent.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, say you're doing the same move, if you're just doing a missile drop kick, but Shawn Michaels did it in a specific style, and The Rock copied it, then I kind of see where it's going, because obviously you've got your own vernacular. If anyone else did a stomp to the chest from the top rope like Finn Balor did, I would completely understand why Finn Balor would be annoyed by it.
Yeah.
Because people do that move, but no one falls backwards, or no one hits it like Finn Balor, whereas everyone else will like roll out of it or something like that. But it's one of those things. It's the same as the code breaker. You'd never see someone doing the exact same code breaker that Chris Jericho did. You'd always see it a little bit different.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think Brett, you know, he's talking obviously about his career in hindsight. Yes, there's always going to be the kind of thing where, you know, he's going to make digs about people. But I think Shawn was a dickhead at this time, so I kind of believe it did happen. Obviously, The Rock, you know, he's out of the business now, so there's no kind of, I guess he won't not say anything about it at all. There's no response from The Rock, and obviously this all comes courtesy of his podcast. But it's Brett kind of speaking from his own kind of violation, his own thoughts or whatever. But it's an interesting take, I think, that he picked, you know, these moments to talk about. He felt that it basically came down to jealousy, the reason that he thought. Just jealousy, and distinctly jealousy. Seeing someone that is a nice kid climb the ladder bothered someone like Shawn Michaels, or bothered Triple H so much that they couldn't see past it. You know, those are his words again. Hopefully, you know, I don't think there'll be anything kind of coming off this. It's just Brett obviously ranting, as he has been doing for the last kind of 20 years, but now he's got a podcast, so he can do it for...
It's one of those situations where, even if it did happen, in the nicest way possible, who cares now?
Yeah, like, The Rock's out of the business.
Yeah, 20 years ago. So,
like, if it was that big of an issue, why are you only talking about it now?
Yeah, but I think it's Brett. Like, he's reminiscing through his career, and that's what.
I bet it wasn't bullying. I bet it was just. I bet Brett's probably just exaggerating.
Yes, and you know, those are obviously Bret Hart's comments. He's welcome to obviously say that. Thank you, Champagne Charlie, for joining us for the news.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to having you on next week's episode. We do wonder what you're going to say on that. We have no idea.
Kayfabe!
Thank you for joining us, Champagne Charlie. And now onto this week's meat and gravy of the episode. So this week we are joined by a personal favourite of mine, be fair, from the British wrestling scene. We're joined by Priscilla.
Hello, darlings. How are we today?
We are very hot.
Dying.
I know. It's boy. Do you know what? This lockdown and this weather has gotten to me so badly. Like, it's actually started affecting my vision to the point that I was watching an old episode of SummerSlam the other day, and I actually could see John Cena. It's horrendous. I don't know how it's.
But here we are, first wise joke of the episode.
First of
many.
So, Priscilla, we're really glad to have you. But we'll be flipping from Priscilla and Ollie throughout the episode as
Oh yes, yeah. As far as what do they call it? It's the him, her, them. This Ollie, Priscilla, fag. I'll answer to literally anything. If you're giving me attention, I'm happy with it, darling.
We'll probably avoid the F word on this occasion.
That's
especially
right.
in the climate.
You can say it. You can't. Yeah, too much.
It's a bit like that South Park episode, isn't it, where Mr. Garrett's going to say it, but everyone else can't say it. They get censored.
Yeah. Garrison is a bit of a hero of mine, but presumably for that reason only. Really, everything else not so much. But I do love the F word. But yes, we can't say it on air though. Sorry, already got to our first.
That's okay. Dropping the first F bomb on the Talking Crap history. I think I haven't said it.
Yeah, but that's not exactly the only word we had to worry about.
But look, you know how we begin, Josh. We begin, of course, with you. And we begin with the Pipe Bomb promo challenge.
We do indeed. It's pretty simple. How many times have I had to read out the rules? Every episode.
At least once more, though.
Yeah. So, the way it works is you get 1 minute to give us a promo based on 2 topics that I give you. One of them being a place and/or championship, and one of them being an opponent, maybe more.
Oh, goodness. Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's slightly terrifying. Not that I definitely script all of my promos or anything, but yeah, this will be fine. Yeah.
It's fair for everyone because we never tell them until the last second.
This is when doing my research really would have paid off, eh? Okay. Go on then.
So you get scored out of 10. 5 points by me. 5 points by Lucas. Lucas, who's Priscilla? Whose team is Priscilla on?
On yours?
On mine. Ooh. Are we doing it like that then? So 1 week after the other. Makes sense. So your 2 topics are you'll be facing Sammy Guevara for the TNT Championship at Fyter Fest for AEW.
Right, is Sammy Guevara is the one who makes lots of offensive comments about women, is that right? Or am I miles off on that?
He did make an offensive comment about women once.
He didn't.
One time. Okay, so this is where my research to not just podcasts, but also watching AEW would have paid off big time.
If it helps, he's part of Chris Jericho's faction in AEW. That
doesn't help even slightly.
Oh.
I'm a professional wrestler. I don't watch wrestling. I'm very Chris Jericho is even a wrestler.
All right. Well,
okay.
Your 1 minute starts now.
For those of you that don't know, although most of you probably do, my name is Priscilla and I am the Queen of the Ring. Now, darlings, I have found out that myself, the Dame of Deville, will be stepping in the ring with Sammy Guevara at Fyter Fest for the TNT Championship, and I am looking forward to it. Do you know why? Because I heard that bitch talking smack about me the other day to his friends. He said that he didn't like the way that I do my makeup, darlings. He said that he didn't like the way I do my costumes. And worst of all, darlings, worst of all, he said that he didn't like how I do my dancing to the ring. Well, let me tell you something, Sammy G. I don't take those compliments lightly one bit. No, Priscilla is fierce, and I am going to take that belt from you no matter what. Because I know what you thought, Sammy. You took one look at this face and you thought, Priscilla, she wears makeup. She must be an easy lay. Well, let me tell you something, Mean Gene. Just like Triple H, Priscilla lays down for no man. Because yes, I may wear makeup, but my makeup is fierce. I am fierce. I am the Dame of the Builder, man that masculinity forgot, and the BITCH and the future TNT champion. What does that spell, darlings? Priscilla.
Very good, very good. The one issue, you went 22 seconds over time.
Oh, too much content on the spot. See, that's my problem. Not enough editing.
I mean, I can edit it out. To be fair, the worst we've had was I can't remember who it was, but they went 30 seconds under.
What?
One of our first ones, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
Right, okay.
we're putting everyone on the spot. What can we expect?
Well, I suppose, but I mean, you can't get much further than just saying your name, surely, in 30. So I certainly can't, but then I've got a big ego. I like to talk about myself.
You've got a lot of nicknames. Obviously, I was going to, you know.
Lucas, do you want to go first this time?
Okay, cool. Like I said, I find it sassy and catchy, and you know, it's all a bit of me, really. I loved how you called him Sammy G. I don't know why. I don't think it's been mentioned at all. Like one of those names that kind of, it just sounds, it really belittled him a lot. And I think obviously, you know, considering his attitude he's had obviously in the past, not hopefully that has changed. He needed that kind of stepping down a little bit. I love how literally you had about half a minute of just nicknames for yourself, and I think that's just something phenomenal. I'm going to go quite high here.
I was once told that the more championships you have, the more you can list in the history to like extend your promos. But unfortunately, no one ever puts a belt on me, so I had to come up with my own list of nicknames.
Well, fair enough. Yeah, got to be your own best seller, I guess. But I'm going to go quite high, 4.5.
Not bad, not bad.
Yes.
4.5.
I do find it quite odd that you haven't scored down for the overtime. Minus the half
some off the
Pacific.
top just for that, but I think nicknames and Sammy G, that brought it back for me.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Lucas was going to give me 7, but just had to work his way down from those seconds. It's understandable.
I mean, there's not much else I can say to that, is there? I'm going to have to go with 4.25. A little bit different than what we normally do.
Doing quarters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take 4.25. I prefer taking the solid 8, but 4.25
makes sense. So that gives you a respectable 4.75 score. Not bad. 8 3/4 rather.
8
There we go. Yeah, 8 3/4 is about the right length for me. Yeah.
I mean, that still puts you in the lead.
Yeah.
And that also means that one of my teammates are still in the lead.
Just to explain what he's on about, we're doing basically the 8 guests are always signed to teams, and whoever kind of has the best promo from each team will promo off each other in the final. So at the moment you're leading for Josh.
Sick. Who's leading for you then?
Leading for me was TJ. He's the only person who's been part of my team.
He's the only team member you have at the moment.
Former British champion for DKW.
Nice.
He's the only person who's been on my team so far. So we shall see as we go on.
I'll keep a close eye on who the competition is, and I'll look forward to kicking their ass when we get to
We hope you do. But look, let's get. So we're talking about Chris Jericho. 30 years this year. You're going to celebrate in the business. 30 years.
Doesn't feel longer than 50, does it?
I mean, yeah. And he'd be 50 as well, wouldn't he? It'd be 30 years career in October, and then obviously his 50th birthday is in November. We're going to kind of delve right in with this episode. We'll focus on the early career of Chris Jericho. So we're going up to about the mid or late 2000s, depending on where we end up. But we're going to start, obviously, the thing is, with Chris Jericho, he spent a lot of time, a lot of promotion in the 90s. And while I love and respect that, when I came into watching wrestling more, it was like WCW, like that kind of period of wrestling. So that's where we're going to begin. So the beginning, of course, of WCW and the Cruiserweight division, which was obviously a really integral part, not just the business, not just WCW, but to the business as a whole, I think. You know, Chris Jericho, you know, those are the first times you saw him against people like Eddie Guerrero's, like Rey Mysterio's, Dean Malenko, and many, many more. And of course, the 1004 holds promo, which I think we talked about promos earlier. We did the part on promo challenge. I think the Chris Jericho 1004 listing arm drags and arm bars, and that kind of promo is something which I think a lot of wrestlers will probably watch as kind of like research and that. Did you see Chris Jericho? Just both of you, did you see Chris Jericho as a cruiserweight wrestler? I know he studied a lot in Mexico. That's where he got his early start. And do people still see him as a cruiserweight style that he's done? Is it still adamant now?
Well, I think that's what made Jericho so useful for the cruiserweight division, wasn't it, really? Because you had the cruiserweights, and I think to begin with, it was very much like we've got another box which, like, the competition aren't filling, so we'll bring in all these Mexicans to come and do all their high flying, and then we'll bring some Japanese guys, and there wasn't many Americans or Canadians in there to begin with. Like, you had Dean Malenko, but, like, there weren't many kind of, like, well, they didn't really have names as such, because everyone was so interchangeable. You had Rey Mysterio, you had people who began to build a bit of a name for themselves. But like Jericho came in, and I'm pretty sure there must have been a conversation where they went, "Hey, do you want to go after the US belt?" And he was like, "No, I'll go after the cruiserweight belt instead, thank you." And like a friend of mine was chatting to me about this the other day and saying about how he was basically kind of like the cruiserweights were there, as I say, to fill a spot. So it's like, you got 20 minutes, and it's like, can I cut up promos? We don't care. It's the cruiserweight spot. Do whatever you want. And it's like Jericho was like the first, in my mind, like cool guy in the sense of, well, he redefines like the idea of cool in wrestling from being the bad guy to turn to the guy who didn't care, which is so popular these days. All these guys are a bit too cool for school and they walk out with those cocky grins. A lot of that came from Jericho going out there going, yeah, I'm going to wear a ponytail, I'm going to wear it on the top of my motherfucking head, bitch. Like, yeah, I'm going to cut a promo. I'm going to challenge Goldberg to a match. I know full well I'm not going to do anything because Goldberg's coming out later against so-and-so. So, yeah, I've just beat Goldberg. I beat the streak. Yeah, brilliant stuff. You know what? I've got this long piece of paper and I'm going to cut a promo. Like, how long are you going to do, Jericho? About 3 minutes, but do it either side of a break. And that way I can say that I've gone and said 1,004 holes, and it's blatantly about 6. Like,
yeah. Most of them are as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everything's an armbar as well. That's what annoyed me so much about it, because I was like, if you're only going to do 6 minutes of a promo, make it look like it's longer, but to the break, at least give us different moves. But now he's so cool that he hasn't even bothered to think up 6 different submissions. He's like, nah, they're all armbars. I think he just took that window, which was essentially like, yeah, like we kind of need a personality, but we don't really care what you do with it. And he just went, right, I'm just going to run roughshod with it. Like, the wrestling matches were amazing, don't get me wrong. But what was the one he had with Eddie Guerrero? He had an absolute stormer with Eddie at the opener of one of the pay-per-views. I don't know if you guys... Yeah,
I think it was it Bash at the Beach, 97, I want to say? I think it was around 97. I think it was around 97, so what I can say. Because correct, that it's so interchangeable, that whole period. But the first part, like we're saying, I mean, obviously, he trained in Mexico for a long while and wrestled in Mexico, so I think that's what naturally fit him in with the WCW cruiserweights at the time. But obviously, ones you haven't mentioned, like Juventud and Psychosis and La Parka and Conan and so many.
We're going to be here all day if you list all of them. Yeah. But there was a lot of Mexicans, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Mexicans, which wouldn't have pleased the current president, I'm guessing. Don't be Hall of Famer. Same question to you, Josh. Like, do you see Jericho as being valuable to the cruiserweight division? Is he still having that, a representative of that style today as well?
Well, yeah, because he was kind of like this icebreaker type character when he got there. And as Priscilla mentioned, he kind of was allowed to do what he wanted to an extent. But yeah, I'd certainly say that he was substantial to help the cruiserweight division, especially in WCW, because he had the opportunity to go for a different title, but he didn't want to. He was too busy doing what he wanted and breaking the mould for cruiserweights and giving them not necessarily a name, but a voice. Showing that they're not just these flippy-dippy guys. Like, they can talk as well. They have a personality too. It was one of those things where... I
don't know if you've ever heard Juventud on the microphone, but Chris Jericho couldn't talk on the microphone. But the other guys could wrestle, so...
Yeah, I think, obviously, Jericho, he introduced that image, I think, and this is obviously what we're getting into now. Getting him signed to a degree, I think, was integral. He introduced that image that you didn't just need to have your big muscly guys going on about vitamins and saying your prayers and that kind of stuff. That was, vehemently said throughout the 80s and 90s, you could have smaller guys that people could relate to. I think something Ollie, you mentioned about with Jericho, like he does this very kind of cool kind of villain very, very well. And we're getting into the fact his debut for me in WWE. So obviously he left WCW because, you know, he was unhappy with the creative, which I guess is it's kind of passe and said so many times about WCW around that period, but he felt he underutilised and that there was obviously a glass ceiling with the cruiserweight division. It wasn't going to get him anywhere where he needs to be. And so he went to WWE in 1999, and I think it's got to be one of the best debut segments ever. I mean, when you debut against The Rock and you're kind of holding your own, I think that's definitely up there. And his first actual feud, though, was against China. And something I found out, his debut match was on the debut edition of SmackDown, which I find it all kind of tied in quite nicely. So you have this whole amazing period of working with The Rock, working with China, working with Road Dogg, and then obviously IC champion. You know, that's where, you know, he's still the record. I think he's still the record-setting champion. The IC champion, I think he is. Someone will correct me if I'm not correct about that. But yeah, what do you think of the Jericho debut then? The countdown to Millennium. I think obviously, definitely, Priscilla, you'll remember that more than Josh will.
Oh, fuck you! Like, I mean, listen, I'm
Josh the spring chicken.
Listen, bitch, I may have been in this business 18 years, but I'm definitely not older than 21. Anyway, that debut was amazing. Like, when he came out and he, like, had 4 minutes of solid, like, I am the Ayatollah rock and roller and all these other things that rhymed and went and went and went. And I will say The Rock's comeback, where he was like, you haven't even explained who you are. And he's like, I did tell you who I am. I'm Chris Jericho. You shut up. It doesn't matter what your name is. Or you'd think I remember a Rock promo, wouldn't you? But like, for both of them, it was such an amazing moment. And then they had the backstage segments where they're cutting each other's promo lines on each other, and like, it was electric. And then those matches with China that you mentioned, like the first time I ever saw Jericho was Royal Rumble 2000, which was him, China, and Hardcore Holly, which was an okay match. But his match with China at what was it, No Way Out, a singles match they had, which ended with a top rope pedigree. And check it out, like, it's not the greatest pedigree in the world, but that match is still one of my favorite ever singles matches, especially for its time, because it was like the AJ Styles, like, John Cena feud equivalent. Like, Jericho went in and said, I'm gonna have match of the night, and he did it against China, who's a great worker in herself, but was never the person who had, like, match of the night. He made a statement after statement after, I can promo, I can do the cool entrances, I can do the cool moves, but I can have the great matches. Yeah, like, he was unstoppable for such a long time, and like, no one could have touched that. It must have made like, when the Radicals debuted, like a few months later, all the other WCW guys coming to town, they must, or was it before? I don't know. Well, even if they came before, I think they must, like, proper squeaky bumhole moment, going, "Oh God, right, well, our jobs are in jeopardy then if this guy's around." Like, it ups the game. It elevated everything, in my opinion.
Josh, what do you remember? What were your thoughts? About the debut of Jericho in these first kind of few months in the company?
I think it really couldn't have gone better for him, like, if he tried, because it was hyped up so much that unless he had done what he had done, I don't think... It's one of those situations where, had he not been able to roll with it, I think it would have flopped, but every single time he said he'd do something, he'd do it. Like, even from his debut, he was just running rings around everyone.
Well, yeah, I mean, getting to that, obviously, his first kind of, obviously, after China feud and the rivalry, had one of my favourite Mania matches, the one against Benoit and Angle, the triple threat, where it was both championships on the line, because Angle was the Euro-Continental champion going into this match. And that finish where the first fall was for one belt and the second fall was for the other belt, and Angle ended up losing both belts. And, you know, just the fact that in 2000 alone he was working with, you know, Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, Billy Gunn, lots of other kind of just really good workers at the time. I think that's what, again, made him elevated. And then, of course, we get to the interesting year of 2001. So we kind of begin that year with the famous. People might not have seen this now, actually, but I remember I watched it recently in researching for this episode. But the "It Never Happened" incident on the April 17th, 2001 edition of Raw, where Chris Jericho won the WWF Championship from Triple H. This was due to Earl Hebner, who was feuding with Triple H. Earl Hebner was the senior referee at the time, feuding with Triple H, and he did a fast count, and so it was kind of reversed, and the belt was given back to Triple H, and he never won the championship on that occasion, and it wouldn't be until the end of that year when he would win, obviously, the Undisputed Championship. But they kind of teased it, and I think it might be one of the earliest examples of them kind of doing this kind of tease. Again, I'm not too sure how much you remember of it, Ollie, at the time.
I literally never heard of it before. I assumed that It Never Happened like moment was some kind of like Vince McMahon Trish Stratus botch on like backstage cam or something. Like I genuinely thought you were going to go into Jericho and Benoit's ladder match at the Royal Rumble that year, but like because that was unbelievable. But like I didn't even know that. That's like okay, fair enough. I can't comment, but like I'm gonna have to Google that after I'm done because that's really intriguing.
It's one of those moments that I think got played quite a lot throughout 2001, particularly when Triple H went on injury. And when you think and you reflect upon it, the fact that obviously Jericho became Undisputed Champion in 2001 and then would lead into a feud with Triple H going into that year's WrestleMania, which is what we're now going to get on to. The Undisputed Championship at that time, it was the biggest match really that had happened. Like when you think about it on paper, like the WCW champion facing the WWE champion at the time. There was a four-man tournament, and he beat Stone Cold and The Rock on the same night, which is just wow. Like you know.
Oh yeah, I remember when the results came, and like I was still quite new to it at the time, and I'll be honest with you, like as much as I respect Jericho's work and some of his matches are great, I've never been a huge Jericho fan, mainly because there's so much that happens in his matches that I find it hard to get those distinct exclamation points of excitement. Like I'm a huge fan of John Cena, and it's because he only has 5 moves. Like I follow that stuff so easily, whereas Jericho is about 37. And it's great to watch, but I rarely have the same kind of emotion. And that show going in, I remember thinking, oh, Jericho's done well to end up as fodder in the first round for this tournament. That's cool. And then he goes on to beat 2 of like the Stone Cold and The Rock, the 2 biggest stars they had by such a long margin. And after a year of Jericho, because he'd been like really involved with the Alliance feud, like they've been like, what side is he going to be on? He effectively cost the Alliance by turning and like making the save Survivor Series and the finish. Like he'd been really involved on the peripherals of Rock and Austin. Then in the one night where it counts, he whoops their asses and it's like Jericho. And there we go. Moving forwards, like he was set undisputedly as quite literally as the undisputed main event moving forwards. It was a cool moment. I can't deny.
Yeah, and obviously we get to a WrestleMania match, which. Looking at again researching for this, which is only WrestleMania main event. Believe it or not, Chris Jericho on and off with the WWE from 1999 to 2018. Only main event to WrestleMania. One occasion that was at WrestleMania 18 against Triple H. In a feud which I think, sadly it suffered from obviously going on on the same show after The Rock and Hulk Hogan just decided to end wrestling, essentially. Decided to have the best match, the biggest reaction you're ever going to get. And the crowd probably just couldn't, I couldn't imagine breathing after that, and then having to follow that must have been a bit like, oh God, oh shit.
Well, there's an old school thing. I'm not sure. I don't know if you're quite old enough to know this, my darling, because I know I'm no spring chicken these days. But like in the old school days of British wrestling, you would have the main event and then you would have a match that follows almost every time. So even if you had like a rumble, it would follow with a singles match. And the idea was to bring the crowd down so that they could get in their cars, drive home safely, and hopefully not shank one of the wrestlers on the way out because they used to get so emotional. So I like to think of that match as their kind of like, we don't want The Rock and Hogan to get mauled. This is a chance for us to get them out of the venue safely, and then we can put on this dreadful, dry botch fest that is Jericho Triple H. Like, on paper, that match is great. If you watch it without the sound on and imagine the audience cares. Okay.
Cool. Let's go.
I am sure that the idea was that they'd have The Rock, Hogan have this crazy response and then put on Jericho Triple H, that dreadful, slow, dry botch fest of a match, so that the audience wouldn't maul Hogan and Rock on the way out. But like, on paper, that match is so good. Like, if you put it on with the sound off and like just imagine that they don't botch the only fucking comeback at the finish and it went smoothly, that would have been a great match. But like, it's just a very simple match, and I feel like that probably cost Jericho a lot, because like, Triple H is the guy that you wrestle. Maybe if you wrestle Triple H, you've had match of the year, but that was not the match of the year Triple H. So it was like the one exception. It's such a shame.
It is. I think obviously when you add their careers up on paper, you're talking about people who now have wrestled combined probably about 50, 60 years, and they didn't deliver at all on that occasion. I think, definitely it did affect Jericho, and obviously going forward, he moved forward with stuff with RVD and Christian, which we're getting to now. So like, we're getting into like.
But that's the point, though, isn't it? Though, when you look at that kind of level of performer, he's gone from main event WrestleMania Triple H to Rob Van Dam, the Lance Storms. He's working Christian, DP. Like, there's still great matches. He is never anything less than 5-star, but like, you can tell how much it hurt him, because he's just the echelon just fell down the ladder to the bottom. It's a real shame.
Yeah, he wouldn't win another world championship until he came back to the company many years later. So obviously we're going to just touch upon this next period very quickly, because obviously the main thing from this period really for me was the feud he had with Shawn Michaels, the first feud around Mania time, and the feud he had with Christian, which involved Trish Stratus at Mania 20, where Trish turned villain, which was a big kind of thing at the time, definitely for women's wrestling and just for WWE in general. They hadn't really positioned her in that role before, but she turned, and it really ends up working. But Jericho always seen as being the person.
No one had ever been cockholded like Christian had until that WrestleMania came along. Like, that was terrible.
I know that. I really like that feud, though. I think it's very underrated. I think, obviously, because it's got the girl involved, I think people might dismiss it as something like, oh, I won't bother watching it. But I think if people do get a chance to watch that stuff, and on the Mania 20 in particular, sadly, because of the Benoit incident, it's kind of soured a bit in the history books. But I think it's definitely a bit of a sleeper here, a bit of a sleeper feud, Christian and Jericho. It is a bit old-fashioned, but I quite like it old-fashioned sometimes.
But it's not that old-fashioned, though, because it's like they play the whole the guys are fighting over the girl angle, which was very like kind of, hey, macho men walking in and like, I'm Rick Rude and I'll take your woman, dog, and all that. But like, they had a weird misogyny kind of twist to it, where essentially Trish catches wins that they're both competing for like her and Lita's affection, and she's super offended by it. So then it's like Christian's like, no, I really like you though. Like, I want to defend your honor now. Like, and it was. I don't really understand how it went from him being in a bet to fighting Jericho, because they'd had a bet and it hadn't gone well for him, but he still wanted to get with Trish. But essentially at the end of the day, she was still like, nah, I'm an empowered woman and I'm going to kick you in the balls, slap you in the face because you were trying to bet on me, and I'm going to sleep with the other guy that was also betting on me. And that is literally school for virtually everyone.
Yeah, I think... I think, them obviously having Trish take that stance definitely helped it not be as kind of old-fashioned. But I think some people might dismiss it a little bit. I mean, Josh, did you know much about that feud, that rivalry between Jericho and Christian?
I didn't know much about it, if I'm honest. I knew that it was a bit of a mindfuck. In the sense
good,
that, it's definitely something I'm going to have to watch after this recording. But...
Yeah, I recommend anyone to kind of watch that match, that feud. It's very good wrestling in the match in the story as well. To be fair, so I think it's definitely one to think. And of course, how can we not talk about this? He was the creator of the Money in the Bank ladder match, which almost over 15 years old now. The Money in the Bank ladder match. David at WrestleMania 21. And Jericho has never won this contest, despite obviously being the innovator. But that was kind of his last kind of thing he did of importance in this first kind of run, I'd say. I think Money in the Bank's become very important to WWE calendar-wise now. And it's changed from a Mania exclusive match to a pay-per-view. And it all started with Jericho, believe it or not.
Yeah, actually, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with him over that because, like, Money in the Bank was a great addition to Mania. I loved it initially as a great, like, kind of, here's an idea that's really, like, this is really going to impact, like, the rest of the year. Builds up great stories as the Money in the Bank in general. But when it came back the second year, and it was Jericho going, yeah, but I didn't win, so let's do it again, and maybe I can win, which is another great kind of way, like, segue into building it. But then that was the beginning. I swear that was the beginning of when they started to not have gimmick matches as like a special event or like announce them for a particular event as like a surprise. It began slowly to start that like calendar where it became that every WrestleMania there will be Money in the Bank. And then a bit later down the line, it became every year we're going to have a Money in the Bank pay-per-view as well as a Hell in the Cell pay-per-view and Elimination Chamber. And now the magic is gone. Like, I used to get so excited when they announced Hell in the Cell, whereas now I know when it's going to be, and I know when it's going to be next year and the year after. It's just who's going to fill the spots. So I know that's not Jericho's fault, but still, if you're listening to this, Jericho, fuck you. That's what I have to say.
I'm loving these rants.
It's the weather, darling.
You're not far off, really. It was obviously that match, and then obviously Extreme Rules as well, I'd argue, as well. Extreme Rules obviously becoming a pay-per-view of its own the next year, which obviously all fits in.
Okay, yeah, so I agree, but with Extreme Rules, at least it was a kind of, to begin with, it was hey, it's going to be a night where there's going to be lots of crazy matches. Like, it was a bit of a concept pay-per-view. Again, it took like 2 years before it became no, it's going to be a normal pay-per-view with an Extreme Rules match, or in this year's case, a surprise match, and the gimmick's going to be Extreme Rules, no pop. But like, but no, you're not wrong. It's a trend that I hate, and it's set in. But I get it because like writing must be difficult. But still, anyway.
The surprise element is gone. But that's for another day. I think in particular, definitely.
Yeah, true. Yeah, back to Jericho and his glorious career. Yeah.
Look, he returned in 2007. And this was again with an amazing vignette series, the whole Save Us, Matrix style vignettes, and then he returned and he started his feud with JBL and Randy Orton. At this time. And then we get to probably my favourite ever Jericho feud, and probably my favourite feud of about the last 15 years. His feud with Shawn Michaels. This was an all-year feud. And when I say all year, we're not talking like Goldberg and Lesnar who did Survivor Series and then something at the Rumble and then something at Mania. We're talking, matches constantly, of a high caliber. They had last man standing matches, ladder matches, they had street fights, they had you name it, they faced each other for it. And this is when, the Jericho that I think most people will be more familiar with, the whole kind of slow talking, in a suit, world champion, I'm the best in the world at what I do, that Jericho. And interesting little fact here, it was his match against Shawn Michaels at the Great American Bash, where they busted open the hard way, essentially like a legitimate way of blood being part of the contest. And it was because Linda McMahon was doing her campaign for governor or whatever it was. They felt that it was too extreme for it to be part of the programming, and they stopped blood effectively following this feud and this moment, because Shawn Michaels basically had a damaged eye. So that was kind of a constant thing throughout this feud and rivalry. They had a fantastic ladder match, but I think got a 5-star off Mr. Uncle Dave. But yeah, this is the Jericho which I love. Personally, I actually love this. So now we're getting into the suited and booted world champion Jericho. I think that's for anyone again who's in the business and looking at how do I be a villain champion. Chris Jericho 2008, I think he literally had it every week. Promos, matches, everything was just where it needs to be.
That's the thing with Jericho, isn't it? It's the consistency that's so impressive with him. Like we mentioned earlier that he had a sort of a much shorter feud with HBK in like 2002 up to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And I loved that because that was the first time I ever saw a feud where, like, you've seen it done before, but it was really clearly in the build-up. It was Jericho saying, "I have been a fan of you my whole life." They were showing vignettes of Jericho doing all of HBK's moves on smaller shows. It's like, "I am so excited to work you. I want to be like the guy who has the best WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels." And then obviously afterwards he does the heel turn. That was such a great moment. Yeah, the big hug after the solid match, and he just kicks him square in the bollocks. But then coming back to it these years later, it was like, right, no, now I don't look at you as my hero anymore. Now I am Chris motherfucking Jericho. Like, and wear a decent suit. Like, I've got a decent haircut finally. Like, I can still cut good promos, but they're a bit more mature now. And like, they're also with their sizing as well. Like, Shawn's always been like the smaller guy and like the underdog, whereas now it's two kind of cruiserweighty heavyweights, but like as serious competitors. And yeah, and I think again that's another thing which elevated it for some of the other people, like the Punks, the Jeff Hardys, who were like on their way to becoming main event stars. They had a solid year of seeing those two guys main event and kind of really have big moments, and it really, like, already the door was open to smaller guys to take those big spots, but it really solidified the idea that actually this can be a long-standing thing, and it's about the work rate now. It's not about the guys. And if you look at where wrestling is these days, like 15 years on, I think that year was a big moment where we went from having a lot of cruiserweights and smaller guys filling spots to suddenly going, no, actually you guys having better matches, so now you get better spots. And it's it's a nightmare for guys like me who can't bump for toffee and have a bad hip because the bar's so high, but like it's great for wrestling. And I liked it. I was a fan.
Josh, your thoughts? Suited and booted.
Well, this version of Jericho is really the one that I kind of saw more. Saw more of. The short-haired, suited up. Mainly his time with Big Show in their Jericho show, whatever they called it. But it wasn't. It didn't feel like him, but it did. It felt more like someone had tried to recreate Chris Jericho rather than him still being him. But it was still fantastic, I thought, anyway. But it's one of those times where I'd only just gotten introduced into him, so I didn't really know much about him and wasn't really fully invested.
So Josh, so you're saying that the world champ Chris Jericho was suited and booted? That was the first you saw Jericho and he started.
That was the most.
Yeah,
I had seen of him when I wouldn't say that was when I was first introduced, but that was when I first really started watching weekly.
Yeah.
So I had seen bits here and there on the internet, but that was about it.
I know what you were saying there, though, like about his about him not being like the same Jericho he was before. Because of course he changed his brand in a big way, but I feel like early like 90s and early 2000s was Jericho's really excited, he's loving life. Then he was like, right, I'm done, I'm going to go and promote Fozzy now and become a world famous rock star. And then he hit a wall when he realized that no one gave a fuck about his music, and he came back grumpy with a short haircut as a middle-aged guy, and he was like, yeah, you know what, okay, this is my day job now because clearly I'm not good enough to be a rock musician, so whatever.
It actually ended up taking off though. They're quite popular now.
Now they are,
Quite, yeah, but it took him like 30 bloody years and a whole like AEW and a cruise ship to make it work, didn't it?
Yeah, I think obviously Jericho is one of those where there's a few names really that when they leave wrestling they get talked about a lot. And Punk's obviously at the top of that list. People won't leave that one alone. But Jericho, one of those. The minute he left WWE a couple of years ago, it was like he's going to go to Japan. Then it's like he's going to come back to WWE. Then obviously even when he's in AEW now, people are like he's going to go back to WWE. And he's one of the people that people always talk about. And I think he's had these gaps. 2005 he left. He came back in 2007. Left again in I think 2010. Came back in 2012. And then we're going to get to that more in part 2. But we're ending this with, obviously, I feel like I said, I feel it was his perfect kind of era, that. So he won the don't know if people remember the Slammy Awards. He won the 2008 Slammy Award for Superstar of the Year. He was, I think, at this point, a 5-time world champion. And he was feuding with John Cena. And that's where we're going to end part 1 of our Jericho thing. So any kind of final thoughts then about what we've kind of said so far? Start first with you, Priscilla. You know, what would be your kind of takeaway moments from Jericho from his first 15 years of his career?
First casual half, yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack, isn't there? I mean, like I was always a big fan of the Japanese junior heavyweights out in Japan. So like when he debuted there against Ultimo Dragon and all of that, like that was the first kind of Canadian or American guy that I'd seen out in Japan doing that style. So I was such a fan of what he was doing right from early days. But I do feel a bit like what Josh was saying there. Like he had the kind of like an initial thing, which was essentially a bit of a rebel, a guy who didn't care to the point that it was cool. And I feel like once he left that first time from WWE, he never quite got back that sort of real rebel moment. Like it's almost a bit like The Rock when he returned in the kind of mid 2000s, when he was like, he started reading his promos off of his wrist and stuff like that, where he's like almost playing the part of Chris Jericho, and it's a good part, and it's always continued to open doors. You'll even look at him today; he's still opening doors for amazing superstars, but like, and people who never got opportunities before, and he always seems to find a new way to do it. But I will say that it always feels like he leaves a little bit of Chris Jericho with that particular kind of door that he opens. It's almost like he kind of scuffs his arm on it and goes, "Yep, left my mark," but it kind of takes a little bit of Jericho away, and he becomes a bit more serious every time. Sometimes that works for him, but I'm with Josh in saying that those kind of feud with HBK and the ladder matches and the suit and the booted, it was cool, but it was a different kind of cool. It was a more mature kind of dad bod Chris Jericho, and I like my twinks. So Jericho with the long hair and the ponytail, that's always going to be my thing, I think, and I'm going to firmly stay there. And I'm going to enjoy watching some stuff late night tonight when no one else is around and can't hear me enjoy myself.
Same question to you then, Josh. What's your kind of takeaway from the first 15 years of his career? Favourite moments, favourite promo, favourite matches even?
Okay, they should be quiet now.
So, right. Same question to you then, Josh.
Well, it's a difficult one because I didn't have many favourite from that era, but the first Money in the Bank match will always be a special one for me because I've always loved Money in the Bank, or just any multi-man gimmick match will always kind of have a special place for me. So probably the first first Money in the Bank.
I think it's important because obviously it's something which is so integral to WWE calendar now that even though he's left, I think it's still there, and so people will obviously I'll keep telling people, and people of my kind of age, who remember that kind of whole happening. We always say it's a Jericho thing, you know, the Money in the Bank, and I think it's something that has left his mark still. But look, part two,
I think actually, sorry, before we go, because I completely forgot, but like you're talking about first time matches, Elimination Chamber. I think he was in the first 3 Elimination Chambers, and he was in the third one from New Year's Revolution. If you haven't seen it, Josh, then check it out, because Jericho opens with "He Who Must Not Be Named," or Chris Benoit, as you know, people who watch wrestling call him. Like they open up and they give it some of the most amazing, intense 5 minutes, and like I don't know, like if you watch those all those old gimmick matches, Jericho is in with all of them. So there's so many matches which I go, oh, that's one of my favourites, and I completely forget he was in there because there's so many people in. But as an innovator of wrestling styles and matches as well, like you can't touch him. But yeah, Elimination Chamber, New Year's Revolution. If you haven't seen it before, check it out. Don't watch the pay-per-view because it's one of the worst god awful pay-per-views ever. But the main event is shit hot, and I really recommend it.
No. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Priscilla. Like, I know obviously we've touched upon a lot about Jericho, and hopefully we've given people a lot of food for thought. You've been a great guest. We really enjoyed it.
I love it, Danny. I look forward to when you call me back for the finals of this promo tournament, which I'm definitely going to win.
Well, that's fighting talk. We have to see what next week's guest will say about
Bring
that.
it on, bitches. Bring it on.
But thanks for joining us, of course, Priscilla. And yeah, we shall see you folks on the other side. I've been Lucas Jackson, joined by Jazzy Josh Porter, and our guest, of course, Priscilla. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Take it easy.